What is up, guys? First Sunday morning of football, and just to give everybody a little idea of how I handle things on Sunday morning for our first Sunday morning of the season, we're gonna start with something nice, little Whistle Pig 18, and we're just gonna run through some of the changes that have happened over the last, I don't know, 48 hours or so. To update on weather, looks like the Bears game and the Washington game are going to be our two weather games. And I think that is pretty interesting because those are going to be some of the more popular cheap defenses. So I think Washington and Chicago are probably your most popular punt defenses, sort of at the bottom. Miami as well, but weather is fine there. So, just to kick it off, a question that I've had a bunch in our Discord this morning is sort of how are you handling Michael Pittman? Michael Pittman is going to be likely the highest owned wide receiver on the slate. And I think in smaller field, and that's a question too that I've gotten a few times. If you are looking at like a single entry or a three max contest, you need to look at the size of that contest. And so in your, 1,000-man or less contests, your smaller fields, I think Pittman will be 40% or so. And I think you have a big advantage in those smaller field single entry contests by not playing him. Same with Washington defense. Wide receiver scoring, defensive scoring has a lot of variance in it. So I think you just need to be cognizant of the size of the contest. 40% owned in, like a 5,000 man, 1,000 man contest. I'm just not playing that guy. So otherwise, I think when you're looking at your main, and actually, so it looks like some people are telling me they can't hear me, but I think you should be good. It is the YouTube link. I will post that in the Discord. Okay, so the main, I think, cash staples that you are going to be playing on DraftKings are going to be Jalen Hurts, Christian McCaffrey, Michael Pittman, Washington defense, Saquon Barkley, and I believe Travis Kelce will be pretty popular, but I think the other tight end option that people will be using is likely going to be Irv Smith or Cole Kmet. I think both of them will be the other options. I have seen some discussion of Mark Andrews over Travis Kelce. You should be playing Travis Kelce if you are paying up at tight end. So the other thing is Scott and Graham and I talked about rookies in week one and how they are overplayed. Not only are they going to be overplayed this week, but this will be probably the highest rookie wide receiver ownership sort of in cash single entry type contests that we've seen in a really long time. People have gotten pretty lazy this week, and they are just plugging in these 3K rookies. You are going to see Jahan Dotson, Romeo Dobbs, Wan'Dale Robinson at massive ownership. I think all of them come in the 20% range in your smaller field contests. And I am just never going to play rookie wide receivers in week one at that type of ownership in tournaments. I think you're fine to play one of them in your cash teams. I think there's going to be a popular build that will have Dotson and Cobb or Dotson and Dobbs. And I'm just not going to do that. So I think I will likely be playing more action in tournaments. I think the sort of popular optimal cash build this week is pretty bad. And so I will be focusing on playing something a little different in the smaller field tournaments. And when I say smaller field, I think your 200, 500 man contests are really, really good this week. You're going to see a ton of the same type of build, and you should be getting different. That build is going to be the 3 expensive running backs, 2 cheap wide receivers, 1 expensive tight end. Just get different. And And some other questions that we had this morning, if I can scroll up here, was what to do with Hollywood. I think Hollywood is a good play, but I think you do need to be cognizant that we really don't know exactly what his role is yet. We do know that the Cardinals will run 4 wide receiver sets. They will use Dortch and Isabella as well as AJ Green. I think Hollywood obviously projects the best of that group, but we still don't know for sure exactly what his role is going to be. And I do think that Arizona has a chance to just flop this week. They are sort of in scrambles with what is going on at wide receiver. They have offensive line injuries. They have a lot of defensive injuries. We don't know if Zach Ertz is really even healthy, and I'm not sure if they do either. So I think the way to sort of get off of Travis Kelce chalk and Washington chalk and all of the, people are going to play a lot of these Cardinals guys just sort of in rotation in tournaments. I really like the Kansas City defense paired with CEH because, Cardinals really have a chance to kind of stink. So if you guys want to throw any questions in there, I will check them out. But otherwise, I'm just going to go through some of the higher projected plays and guys that I like that are not really going to be all that owned. So I think at quarterback, your 3 most popular guys are going to be Hurts, Jackson, and Mahomes. I think Kyler has a chance to get pretty popular. But I do know there's enough questions on the offense that he may not really get up there. I think I probably like Justin Herbert more than Jackson, Mahomes, and Murray. He's just so easy to stack this week. You really just have 4 options in Big Mike, Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer, Gerald Everett. And all of those guys are coming in at fairly low ownership. I think they'll probably all be less than 10% owned, which is really nice because then you can just play the chalky running backs and not have to worry about, getting weird at running back. Then on the running back side, we talked about Joe Mixon a little bit on the show. Kind of glossed over that game because it's not a great game, but I just wanted to note that I think Joe Mixon is probably like a top 5 or 6 running back play on the weekend. There's a chance that we see, last year Burrow was coming off the knee. This year he did have surgery, did not play in camp at all. So I could see the Bengals, as a touchdown home favorite, sort of easing him in a little bit like they did last year. I doubt it'll be, a whole month like it was last year, but I think we could see, a ride the pony game with Mixon in week 1, see him get 25 carries or something against a Steelers defense that was just horrible against the run last year. So don't forget about him. I'm not sure he's a guy that I would play in cash games on Draftkings, just because we do know he's really, they spent the offseason sort of trying to figure out P. Ryan, Chris Evans, what they're going to do behind Mixon, because they really don't love him as like the pass catcher. So I think he would be better on FanDuel, but on FanDuel he's, I think, 2,500 more than Barkley and like 1K more than Aaron Jones. So you're probably not playing him on cash there either. But I think he's a pretty good tournament play. He's going to catch some ownership, but he was kind of a late riser. So especially in the lower dollar tournaments, I don't think he will have as much ownership. And then DeAndre Swift and Alvin Kamara are kind of like your forgotten guys with massive ceilings. They'll have a little bit of ownership, but I think those are 2 guys to really look at in the sense of whether those games pop off. Everybody loves that Philly-Detroit game, but no one's really talking up these Detroit guys. I think it's Hawkinson or Swift. And then my favorite running back play of the weekend for tournaments is Elijah Mitchell. You go back and you look at his few healthy games, and he averaged something like 23 or 24 carries per week. The one guy that was really eating into his ability to catch passes was Jermichael Hasty. They used him as sort of that hurry up running back, and he is gone. I think Jeff Wilson could eat into that a little bit, but I don't think they view Jeff Wilson as much as a PPR guy as they did Jermichael Hasty. So I think we could see Mitchell catch 2, 3, 4 balls, unlike he did last year, and nobody's going to play him. You add the weather, and I think he's a guy I'm going to have a lot more than I planned to 3 days ago. And then the other question on these rookie wide receivers, I think Romeo Doubs is probably the one I would have the most confidence in, but I will note there were some clips this week and 2 weeks ago where Rodgers had complained about drops from Doubs. He is essentially one drop away from getting benched. And anyone who would say, oh, they can't bench him, they don't have anybody else. Rodgers used to bench Devontae Adams for dropping the ball, so it can happen. So I think you have to be cognizant of the ownership that Doubs is going to have. If he's going to push 20-25% owned in some of these contests, with a lot of question marks. I mean, Watkins is still going to start there. Watkins is a guy who I expected to be really popular coming into the week, and no one's really going to play him. They're going to play Doubs and Cobb. So I think the Rodgers, Aaron Jones, Sammy Watkins stack is pretty interesting as a way to just pivot off of Cobb and Doubs that people are going to play fairly heavily. And I just don't see what the ceiling is for Randall Cobb. So he's probably a guy I'm not going to play in tournaments. Can he catch 2 touchdowns? Sure. But I'm not looking for the guy that's going to, go 4 for 45. He'll pay off his price tag, but he's not going to win you $1 million. And especially this $5 milli, that's so big. And then Elijah Moore is a guy we expected to catch a bunch of steam. Hasn't really happened. So I think he's a guy, if you want to load up on, he's Scott's boy this week, you feel free. I would not have any worries about playing him in contests, what his ownership might be. And then defense. We got to talk about defense. Washington defense, going to be 20% owned or so. For me in tournaments, it just makes them unplayable. I know people, they fall victim to just, they're the highest projected by a good bit. But defenses are just so volatile that you have to know that you just can't eat that ownership in a larger field tournament. You're playing a 100-man tournament, you want to play Washington, that's fine. But it's not like they're, a great play, best play we've seen. You look at during the COVID era, we had the week where, Kirk Cousins was ruled out in Green Bay, should have been 60% owned or something along those lines. This is not that kind of a case. So looking at defenses around them, I think Miami is your most obvious pivot. And then I think Chicago is probably after that. They'll be somewhat popular, but they're going to be half, a third of the ownership of the Washington defense. I know Pittsburgh is a defense that people are going to play a good bit, and I'm not really into that. I would prefer Miami or Chicago. And then I think Jacksonville is a really nice pivot off of the Washington defense. I mean, they're going to be 3, 4, 5% owned. Washington's going to be 20. And if this game goes the other way, you have a ton of leverage on the field. And I like them paired with Travis Etienne. So the other thing that I want to sort of talk about a little bit, that I've, I get a lot of questions on, and I sort of briefly mentioned it in the beginning, is looking at your contests and what you are entering before deciding what you're going to play. So you think about the Millie Maker, and you don't want to have 120% combined ownership or whatnot through your players. But then you look at a smaller contest where there's 200 or 100 people, and you don't want to have 200% combined ownership or 250%, something along those lines. But you really just have to think about how owned players are going to be as the contests get smaller. So 1,000-man contest, Michael Pittman is going to be higher owned than a 10,000-man contest. So you just don't want to walk into a 40% owned wide receiver, 30% owned defense. And people often will say, well, it's a single entry contest. And that's where you can get a ton of leverage, especially week one when we have a lot of questions. So you look at, the single entry contests can be huge. There are 10,000, 25,000 man single entry contests. And just because they're single entry does not mean that you can just eat all of the chalk. And it makes it especially better to pivot off of the chalk because everyone else is going to do that. So people will build like a single entry team, that'll have one or two things different than their cash team. They'll enter that in all of the single entry contests. I know that's easier to do, but that's not how you should be building. So you should be looking at the size of these single entry contests before you enter that. So the team that I'm going to put in a 200-man single entry contest is going to be completely different than the team that I'm going to put in a 10,000-man single entry contest. So you look at the 40K huddle, which is a popular one. It's the $5 single entry, 9,500 entries. A ton of those entries are going to be people's cash teams or one-offs of their cash teams. So in a contest like that, I'm not playing Michael Pittman. I'm not playing Washington defense because they are going to be way higher owned than they would be in a 10,000 person multi-entry tournament. So in that contest, I'm going to treat it the same way I would treat a 10,000 man multi-entry contest if I'm going to put one team in, because the field is not doing that. And that's where you get your advantages by just thinking through what you are building. The other thing I want to talk about is mini stacking. I have talked about this a lot before, but I know that we have new listeners. When you are hand building a team, you want to make sure that you are having multiple layers of correlation. So say I start my team with, say I'm dead set on playing Jalen Hurts, and I want to play him with Dallas Goedert. Then you want to bring that back with DeAndre Swift. Great, you have your correlation there. Then you should also be thinking about what other types of correlation you can get into. So maybe we do the CEH and then we combine that with the Chiefs defense. So you now have two layers of correlation, which gives you more and more opportunities to make it to the top of the contest. So then you can take it one step further and you look at, what is another game that you really like that you feel like the field is, not playing as much as they should be. So you say, okay, I really like the Raiders Chargers game. I'm going to play Hunter Renfrow and Mike Williams. So you now have 3 sets of correlation. And then you can just, fill this lineup out with your favorite 2 plays after that. And you look at your projected ownership, on that team. And it's like, I don't know, 45%, something like that. You can then just eat the chalk with your last 2 plays. You're totally fine to play Michael Pittman on a team like that. So for the late joiners, I just want to note, I think the way that you are starting, again, your cash team on DraftKings, you are starting with Jalen Hurts, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Michael Pittman, the Commanders defense. And then I think you are picking one of 3 tight ends between Irv Smith, Travis Kelce, and Cole Kmet. And then you are going from there. I think the field is going to be using Randall Cobb, Wan'Dale Robinson, Romeo Doubs, and Jahan Dotson as their punt wide receivers. If that's what you want to do in cash, I think that's going to be the most popular option. Again, I don't really love it. That's why I'm going to be playing a lot of, 100, 200 man type fields and doing a completely different build structure without those punt wide receivers. So looks like don't have a whole lot of other questions. I'll scroll up and see if I can find anything else before we get out of here. Oh yeah. So with Kittle out, I think if you're playing a tight end on San Francisco, I would play Ross Dwelly. I think he is the pass catching tight end, but with Tyler Croft there, I think Croft is going to eat into the work that we used to see Dwelly. Dwelly used to be a lock and load when Kittle would miss. I still think I probably prefer Dwelly to Isaiah Likely, um, but I'm probably not really playing either of those guys. I think people may play Tyler Croft a little bit, but I would definitely prefer Ross Dwelly. But I think all of those tight ends are going to play, and I don't think they're really going to have a ton of usage. So that is it for week one. If anyone has any more questions for me, I will be in the Discord.